Portsmouth. For more information, please visit restoreportsmouth.com.
Hey, welcome to Proverbs on the Patio tonight. Obviously, I am not on the patio. It is a little chilly tonight, and with the sun setting earlier and earlier each day, it's a little more difficult for me to pull that off. So every once in a while, I'll probably be inside. I'll probably jump out on the patio on some warm nights. But for tonight, Proverbs chapter 21 will be indoors, and that'll actually result in better audio for you, hopefully a better experience all around. I'll remind you that Proverbs on the Patio is where we go chapter by chapter through the book of Proverbs, looking for wisdom and insight. And the reason that the book of Proverbs is not categorized by subject matter is so that every day, let's say you read a proverb a day, you'd get a little bit of wisdom from every angle of life. So there's not one proverb that's all about money and another chapter that's all about relationships and another chapter that's all about kids. It's sprinkled into every chapter, these little quips and wise sayings. So often, from one verse to the next, the writer will have changed subjects, and that is on purpose. So hopefully, as we cover, I'm only going to cover 6 verses tonight. As we cover these verses, this will be a little bit of wisdom that maybe you needed this week, maybe some encouragement or some hope that you needed this week. And I'm well aware of the week we're having. We're in the middle of an election. Really, everything happened last night, and so now we're still coming to grips as a nation with all that we witnessed, all that we've seen for the last year as campaigns have gone on. And really, that ties in well to verse number 1. So regardless of what happened last night, some of you are super disappointed, some of you are super encouraged, regardless of whether or not your guy, your team, your candidate, or your policies won through. We treat each other with love and respect, and as a pastor, I'm well aware, especially in our church, in our setting, no matter what happens every year or every other year, every 4 years, half of our church is disappointed or discouraged, while the other half is, on cloud 9. But we have come to realize that Proverbs chapter 21 and verse 1 is what matters. Notice this: the king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he will. Listen, if you're disappointed in who won or you're ecstatic about who won, I want to remind you, look, God is still on the throne. We don't follow an elephant. We don't follow a donkey. We follow the Lamb, the Lion of Judah, the Lamb who laid himself down, the Lion of Judah who came to our rescue. Like, we are not part of what is, like, we're involved, but we don't rest our hope in who is or isn't in the White House. And so no matter who it is that's in control, whether it's our new mayor in our city, we had a mayor step down, so we definitely have a new mayor. We have a lot of new city council members, and I hope that you're engaged in all these things, but I hope you aren't placing your hope or your value in who does or does not win. But then in verse 3, notice the proverb says, to do righteousness and justice is more acceptable to the Lord than a sacrifice. This reminds me of the story of Saul. He was a king that God asked him to do a specific thing, and then when he didn't do that thing, he just decided to offer sacrifices. And Samuel comes up to him and says, hey, what's this I hear about you not following God's command? And Saul says, well, I did this and this and this. And Samuel said, the prophet said to the king, do you suppose that God prefers sacrifices to obedience? And that's really the thrust of this verse. It is better to do righteousness and justice, to do what's right, to do what is just, than to do what's wrong, to do what is unjust, to take advantage of people, and then throw some money in the plate, make a sacrifice, make a big show, make a religious ritual of it. God prefers us to do what is right. I thought it would be quiet tonight, but my dog Maya joined us, and she's already crying. I don't know if you can hear her, but she might be interrupting us. Verse 5, the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. As we've mentioned over and over, these are not promises, these are proverbs. More often than not, this will come to pass. So if you want to make sure your plans come to abundance, then do what is diligent. Make plans and be diligent, follow through. We know a lot of people who make plans but never follow through. This is the idea of someone who is planning but is also diligent. Day in and day out, they're faithful. Look, I've heard some great business plans. I've heard some great ideas from people. The world has no lack of new ideas. It's follow through that makes all the difference. And in this case, everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. Every time you hear a scheme that sounds too good to be true, every time somebody tells you that within a matter matter of months, you're going to be a millionaire. Listen, you should have red flags going up left and right. It takes time to do anything that is worth doing. So if you're hasty and you're constantly changing your mind, I remember years ago, I was talking to a gentleman who managed a large group of mechanics. And he talked about how often the guys that worked for him would leave to make a $2 an hour raise at the next body shop down the road or the next auto body shop. And he said, if those guys would stay with me for 5 or 6 years, they would be running a crew. They would be making way more than they're making now. But every 3 years, man, they transfer, they move, they chase the grass that's greener on the other side instead of sticking with, in their case, their company. He said, and our company has a track record of if you stick around this long, man, you get promoted, you excel, you do well. So listen, don't be hasty to just change your mind, change your major, change your idea, change your identity, change everything. Look, stick with it for the long haul. All right, so we're 3 verses into these 6 verses that I want to pull out of Proverbs chapter 21. Jump all the way down to verse 13 with me. Whoever closes his ear to the cry of the poor will himself call out and not be answered. There are people right now who need something as simple as a helping hand. Now, whether that's food or financial help or just encouragement, when we turn a blind eye or deafen our ears to it, the Bible says, you one day will call out and not be answered. Now, it doesn't say financially, it just says in general. So you may not have a financial need right now, but when you look down on others who have needs, there will come a day when you will need something or someone and you will not be heard. Again, a proverb, not a promise, but we know people who too often, there she is interrupting us, we know people who too often turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to the needs of others, only to themselves have needs. So listen, this is why I always listen. I want you to hear me say this as the pastor of the church, but also as another believer alongside you. I don't often know what to do when someone needs help, but I'm going to pray about it. Now, sometimes people take advantage of individuals. Sometimes people come into the church looking for a handout, but our church has means and ways to help people. And even right now, I know of families who are getting help through our benevolence ministry. And we have so many checks and balances to make sure no one takes advantage of that. But our church has always had an ear to the ground, listening for needs. Whenever I meet with our small group leaders, one of the things we talk about is needs in the church. And I say, listen, if someone's attending a group at our church and has a need, we want to know about it. And so more often than not, the needs that are met are because we put an ear to the ground and we listen up for it. So we should have eyes and ears aware of the needs around us. Verse 17, just 4 verses down. Whoever loves pleasure will be a poor man. He who loves wine and oil will not be rich. The idea is those who, as soon as they get something, like money or the ability to purchase something, or as soon as they get something nice, man, they drink it, they eat it, they take advantage of it. They don't know how to save. They don't know how to tell themselves no or be patient. This ties in well with verse 20, which is the same idea but taken to the next step. Precious treasure and oil are in a wise man's dwelling, but a foolish man devours it. The idea is as soon as he's got it, it's gone. This is really, really key for those of us who struggle maybe financially or are trying to do what's wise with money. When you get income, when you have savings, when you have resources, you should not look to spend them as soon as you get them. We all know people that as soon as they get a little bit of money, they're out there spending it. When they get their tax return, they're out there spending it. The idea is this: when you are wise, you will have savings, you will have resources, you will have reserves, you will have more than enough. In this passage, we see that precious treasure and oil. 2 things here. Treasure to buy stuff, but also the stuff that people need. Oil. This is something they worked with. This is something they lit their candles with. This is something they cooked food with. This was a necessity for them, and they used it well. Why? They had plenty of it because they were wise. And there she is, interrupting us. Maya, you're being rude. Are you being used by the enemy to distract us tonight? Maybe, possibly so. Who knows? Maya, you need to chill out. Why don't you lay down? We're almost done. So those are the 6 verses that I wanted to pull out. We can trust, no matter who does or doesn't win elections, that God is in control and he directs the king's heart. So listen, hear me say this. It's timely that we're in Proverbs chapter 21 this week. We needed to hear that. Number 2, we should be doing righteousness and justice, not just offering sacrifice. Number 3, we should be diligent in our plans, not just hasty. And then finally, We not only need to have an ear for the poor and the needy and the hungry, but we should be wise enough not to consume our goods as soon as we get them. Why? So that we can be with like the rich man who has precious treasure, not the rich man, the wise man who has precious treasure and oil in his house. Why? So that when we hear about needs, we can be generous. Why? Because our house is full of oil and treasure. Hard to be generous when you spent it all. Hard to be generous when you've eaten it all. Hard to be generous when you consume it as soon as you get it. Guys, the point of Proverbs is not how to make money to have money. The point of these Proverbs is not how to be wise so that you have more resources than everybody else. The point is always how to be wise with what we have so that when we have more, we can give more, we can be more generous. We don't have to let our need dictate how generous we are because we have our needs covered. So church, be generous, be loving, be hope-filled, regardless of who did or didn't win this election, the next election. And I don't know about you, but I've had so many, this is the election of our lifetime, and this is the most important election of our lifetime, that I'm just glad this one's over, and I'm already nervous that we've begun planning and worrying about the next one. God loves you. God has a plan for you. God knew about today. He knew about yesterday. He knew about 4 years ago. He knew about 40 years ago. God is not surprised by any of this. Church, we're going to get through this pandemic. We're going to get through this season. We're going to get through these difficult times. I want to give you a big shout out before I close out. Sundays have been incredible. We had probably one of the best services we've had this year outside under the tent last weekend. We're actually adding more chairs, and we're going to have to start spreading out outside of the tent because so many people are showing up for these services, and we're having to make some decisions about what that looks like for the future to make room for your friends, your guests, some of your neighbors that have started coming. But also, we're trying to be wise as we move more and more ministries indoor. Our kids are meeting indoors. Our students are meeting indoors, and they've started meeting this week, actually. They've begun meeting every single week, and so our student group is back up and running on Sunday mornings at 9:30. And we're excited about the future, knowing that it's going to be different. It may even be difficult, but God's building His church. So guys, we love you. We miss you if you haven't seen us in person in a while. We look forward to the day we get back together. Have a great rest of your Wednesday night. And Maya says, have a good night too.